Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com, the ChrisVossShow.com. Hey, we're coming here with a great podcast. We certainly appreciate you tuning in. Not you, but you. You over there. You over there. I'm pointing at people. Liz, we appreciate you showing up too as well. I realize I might be, it may appear that I'm pointing you. If you want to see the pointing, which is, of course, the point of the show, go to youtube.com/Chris Voss. Hit the bell notification. When you hit it, you get this completion of feeling of completion. Either way, we try and be inclusive to people who are dyslexic. You get the feeling washes over you that you belong to something, and that the show loves you no matter what, very much differently than your family. So anyway, go to there and see that. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. See everything we're reading and reviewing. Also, you can, there's just a multitude of things you can do. Now you have something to do with your life. You can go to Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, wherever all those cool kids are playing now, so that you can see all the things the show's doing over there as well. Today, oh my gosh, we did it again. Oops, we did it again. I don't know. Do I have to pay for that as a plug? The attorneys are checking. Anyway, guys, we have an amazing author on the show. She's the author of 4 different books, and she has her newest book out today. She's going to be talking to us about. It's going to be pretty freaking awesome. This book is coming out October 19th, 2021. So you want to pre-order this. It's coming in all the different formats, including the audio CD. Those are really cool. And the title of the book, you may want me to tell us the title, Chris. Impact Players: How to Take the Lead, Play Bigger, and Multiply Your Impact, by Liz Wiseman. She's going to be on the show with us today talking about it. And she is a researcher and executive advisor who teaches leadership to executives around the world. She is the author of New York Times bestseller, Multipliers: How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter, The Multiplier Effect, tapping the genius inside our schools, and Wall Street Journal bestseller, Rookie Smarts: Why Learning Beats Knowing in the New Game of Work. She is the CEO of the Wiseman Group, a leadership research and development firm headquartered in Silicon Valley, California. Welcome to the show, Liz. How are you?
I'm great. Today is my birthday, literally.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
There you go. Well, it's a birthday show. I feel bad we didn't probably bring cake or anything. We should be like a restaurant. Somebody get some cake in here. I'm just kidding. There's nobody else out there. But it's fun. So welcome to the show. Give us your plugs, your .coms, where people can find you on the interwebs, and of course, order up your fine book.
Oh, well, let me see. I'm not too hard to find on the internet. You can find me at thewisemangroup.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, at Liz Wiseman. And if you are interested in any information about the book, you can get it on any of the places where you buy books online. And the book's website is impactplayersbook.com.
There you go. And the PR department sent us a copy. Let me see if I can get oh, wow. It's got a green cover. So the green screen is whatever. But there'll be a nice, when we do this in post, there'll be a nice, beautiful book in the center there. So what motivated you to write this book?
Well, when you've written several books, I tell you with the honest answer, you know what motivates you about to write a new book? It's because you get tired of the old book. It's like, and I have just had this great opportunity. It's this first book I wrote that I was hoping, 14 people would read. And I don't know, I thought maybe 1,000 people would read the book. Like my former colleagues, my mom, would be good for 2 or 3. And it turns out the book is, I don't know, we're somewhere close to 1 million.
There you go.
Copies on that book. And it just was a book that was really valuable to a lot of people. And it was this idea that some leaders are multipliers to their team and others are diminishers, like meaning some leaders make you smarter, more capable, better. You play at your best around these leaders, and others like suck the life out of you and your team. And I don't know if it was the part about suck the life out of you and your team that got people's attention, but it was a book that a lot of people read and got a lot of value out of. So I'm out there teaching people how to be the kind of leader that allows people to contribute fully.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what motivated me to write it is realizing there's more to the story than just leadership. And for me, like the decision point, like was captured in this comment someone made about their like pouring my heart out, teaching leaders. This was at Salesforce, how to be the kind of leaders who are multipliers and all this. And one engineering manager, he said, well, that sounds great. Like, I want to be a multiplier, but you can't multiply zero.
What?
And I'm like, what? What does that mean? Are you talking like, because I'm talking about like how to use the intelligence and capability of your team. And he says, I can't multiply zero. And I'm like, are you saying that like the people who work for you are zeros, that they're like, you've got a collection of dummies? And I'm trying to understand what he means by this. And then he kind of goes on to explain it. He's like, well, yeah, as a leader, I need to bring the right mindsets and practices, but so do the people who work for me. Oh,
well, didn't he hire him though?
Right. But there is a discipline, just like there is a discipline to leadership. And there's a lot of people who've been studying leadership and what does the leader of the future look like. And I'm one of those people who has been trying to articulate these new models of leadership. But, the work world has changed. The rules have changed. The environment's changed. And, it made me realize, well, who's been studying what the new model of contributorship looks like? Because it's not the way of showing up of yesteryear where the boss told you what to do, you got it done, they say jump, you say how high. I'm like, it's a very, very different work world right now where people really need to be self-managing. Like kind of the old, boss employee relationship has been broken. And, if it wasn't already broken, the pandemic has really ripped it apart. And there is a way of showing up that is new and different. And so I'm like, you know what? That seems to be interesting. And I used to work at Oracle, and the president of the company, he once said, Liz, you are a dog on a bone. That's what you are. Like, you're the most tenacious person I've ever met. And that was like meant in both, kind of with both sets of connotations about that. Like, Liz, you are amazingly tenacious, and you are also annoyingly tenacious. And I tend to be like that as a researcher. Once I decide something's interesting and worthy of study, I'm like, Urgh.
Yeah.
And so this was one that was interesting. Like,
so
what does it look like? Why do some people show up big and contribute even despite the like lack of good leadership? And then why are other people just stuck going through the motions of their job? Like, why do some people have big impact, particularly when they're not working any harder?
Yeah, this is a really important thing to learn because it's something I always did. I always just, even when I had an uninspiring leadership, I just was like, I'm just going to give it my all because I'm practicing to own my company someday. And to me, it's to my work ethic and what's important to me. So give us an overall arcing rundown of the book. I think you've given us a little bit, but what are some of the details in the book that you talk about?
Well, in the book is a contrast, and it's kind of the thing I do. I do these sort of contrast studies, and it's a contrast between what I call kind of a typical contributor and the mindset that we hold when we're in this kind of like thinking about ourselves as typical contributors versus the mindset of an impact player. An impact player is a notion that I've, lifted out of sports. And, in the sports world, the impact players are the people who, make the plays and people you can count on and people who play big, but also, make the whole team better. They're kind of like the clutch players on teams, and they're the ones the managers of the team and the coaches turn to when they're in a really critical situation. And this is a look at what are the impact players of the work world doing differently than everyone else. Like, why do we have certain people that we turn to in these kind of clutch moments? And, when we asked managers, like, who are these people? They all knew immediately, oh, this person. Well, why? And they're like, I hadn't thought a lot about that before. And it was in the process of interviewing people that they're like, oh, yeah, I'm now starting to understand why this is the person I put on a situation when things have gone wrong, or when it's high stakes, or when it's really important. This is why this person is my right hand. And so we looked at how do typical contributors approach work, and how do these impact players approach work. And the book is really about kind of small differences in how we think and how we act that end up creating huge differences of impact. And there's 5 in particular. And I think, Chris, probably the most interesting thing when I looked at these differences, it was the situations that differentiated these impact players were how they handled not the big like moments of crisis, like where, a hero sort of emerges from the ashes, like having saved the day. It's how they handle what I call these everyday challenges, the things that we deal with, whether we work in tech or finance or in hospitality. It's like messy problems, things that don't fit neatly in people's one job, and unclear roles, and unforeseen obstacles, and targets that are moving as you're shooting at the goal, and unrelenting demands, just feeling like there's just more work than we can really get our arms around. And these are the problems that exist everywhere, unless maybe you are in a little organization of one. But they're problems that exist everywhere. And the way that these impact players handle these is radically different. And, for example, there's 5 of them, but let me just start with the first, is that when problems are really messy, and, our problems are getting more complex and they rarely fit neatly. They don't line up with org charts. Like, okay, this is a messy problem. It's not my job. It's not her job. It's not his job. It's like nobody's job, but yet it's everybody's job. Most people say, okay, well, let me do my job. I'll do my part of that. Whereas the impact player says, you know what, let me do the job that needs to be done. Like they get what's important, and they don't let their job description put a cage around them. Like, oh, I can't really do that. It's not my job. It's like, well, this is the job. My job is to solve problems and respond to important opportunities. So they venture out. They're like roomy about their jobs. And leaders of organizations love it because they're the people that go do the important things while other people are just turning cranks doing their job.
Excuse me. So are most people, I mean, is the book helpful for leaders in identifying who their impact players are? Do they need to fill a whole team with impact players? Is the 80-20 rule always going to apply to, you're just going to have better people sometimes? How does that all play out?
Well, I don't know exactly how people will use the book. That's one of the things that's really interesting when you release a book. You don't quite know what people are going to do with it. And it's usually not what you think people are going to do with it. And in some ways, I wrote the book for the contributor. Like, this is your playbook for how to do work that really matters and make a difference, and not get stuck doing too much of the same kind of work, but to do work where you don't burn out because you're making an impact. But I've already got like a little bit of a glimpse that managers are going to co-opt this book because every manager who's read an early copy of it, they've said, oh yeah, like this has helped me see who my impact players are. Like, I read this and I know who these people are, and now I understand better why these are my go-to and my impact players. And then they very quickly go to, okay, can you help me figure out how to hire a whole team of people like this? And so really, and I guess it doesn't surprise me so much. The book is really like, here's how to work this way yourself, and here's how to populate a team of people who are like-minded.
Yeah. It's you nail it right on the head. I was always one of those people. Even when I worked for other people, I was at my last company, I was an entrepreneur. And so I had like carte blanche to go walk around as a CEO and make changes and adjust processes and systems and innovate. And I've just always been one of those people. And I do get bored with my job description, even when I work for other people or when I work for myself, people used to always ask me, they go, so you're the CEO of the company? I'm like, yeah, I'm the CEO and the janitor. I seem to be the only one who picks up the trash around here too. Um, but
Well, but that would be the hallmark of an impact player,
yeah,
which is, you know what? If that's the job that needs to be
yeah.
done, if you're about to have like a customer visit and there's trash on the floor, like that's the moment of impact. Like,
Mhm. Yeah, and I've never seen my job description as like there's the job description. To me, it's job security to go do extra stuff around the office. Now I don't know, maybe I won't get appreciated, maybe I'll get fired, but probably get fired the way I go. But that's why I work for myself.
yeah.
Does not play well with others. So you give so a lot of this too people could use if they're a player or quote, I guess, employee, and they want to become more impactful, or they want to maybe learn to be one of these more impactful players. They could use this as kind of like a blueprint or manual to become that sort of person.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's it's a manual that probably has more in it than any one person can get their arms around. But if you want to have more impact, I could probably guarantee you there's something in the book that you could do that would allow you to contribute more value, have more impact, and build more influence, and really build power.
Mm.
Build power, because this, it is absolutely true that when I look at like the anatomy of these impact players, they are not your classic superstar.
Mm.
It was so fascinating to me. I was surprised actually that in the 170 impact players we studied, not a single one of them was described by their manager as a prima donna, a bully, a bull in a china shop. They're not these kind of I don't know, glory-seeking superstars. They're serving. Like their orientation isn't like, hey, look at me, I'm building my brand, I'm big. Their orientation is outward on other people. Like, what's important to my boss? What's important to this company? What's important to my colleagues? And how can I do work that's value add to that?
Mm-hmm.
But in the process, they become extremely valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're working on what's most important, and when you're stepping up and taking these leadership roles, when you're getting things done, when you're known as kind of like the clutch person, you're building a lot of influence and a lot of power. And you end up building that kind of power where you're not like, oh yeah, this is our like cleanup guy, this is our go-to person, but then like we take him out of the closet when we need him and then we put him back in the closet. It's You have an incredible power base and voice in the organization, so you become not just a doer and not the person who's exploited. You become someone who's powerful, who's shaping the agenda.
So I would be really interested if you took a study, and I suppose it would take a while to see how these people evolve through an organization. Do they become CEOs, or do the power players who are all about building brand and making a bunch of noise and I'm doing so good? Which of them usually ascend to the highest levels of the echelons of the company?
Mm. Well, we see kind of two tracks. There's a pattern we see across all the impact players is that they're given bigger opportunities for
Hmm.
certain. And some of that looks like in the form of bigger opportunities that like rises through the ranks. And then they, often do become senior leaders of organizations. And, there are some organizations where the most egotistical rise to the top.
Yeah.
They're rarely the best organizations. If you look at the best
Mhm.
organizations, those senior leaders have to manage ego.
Yeah.
There are people like I'll be seeing Tim Cook this week. Tim Cook, who is one of the best examples of someone who holds such a powerful position in the world, but like knows how to contain his ego,
Yeah.
um, and focus on other people and on the customer. So we do see a lot rising in organizations, but we also see other cases where people, they're like, I don't want to be a manager. Like, that's not what I want. That's not the impact I want. I'm not trying to rise through some sort of hierarchy. I want a bigger voice in the world. or I want more control of my career, of my work. Like they're using that influence and power to shape the terms of their employment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, this is the kind of work I want to do. Here's where I think I could be most valuable, you know, of this overwhelming workload. Here's the part where I think I can be most useful. So let me work there. And because they have this track record, they deliver, they're these impact payers, people shape jobs around them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you would say that these folks basically, whatever you give them, they're going to really exponate it. They're going to make it their own, and instead of working in the confines of, well, this is my job and I go home at 5, and I give the least amount I could possibly do, that as a leader, by identifying them and making sure that these people are taken care of, that they're, as they go through the organization, you're able to give them stuff, and they're going to keep applying that same sort of thing. I mean, that's why I eventually I saw everything I did at CEO training, so owning my own business training. So I always give the 110%, because for me, I was educating myself, and I was like, yeah, they could fire me tomorrow during a recession. That happened. But it's not that I didn't give tons of value, but it's what I learned. And then now I'm taking someplace else. Is that a good analogy?
Yeah, it's that they're people they deliver value and they build influence and impact. And that influence can be used in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm. I can validate what you're saying. I don't have to validate what you're saying, but I'm going to throw my 2 cents in saying, yeah. I mean, when I had our biggest company at 100 employees, it was, you would always have the people in your face that would be the rah people. I'm doing so great, Chris. I'm doing, I'm kicking butt and whatever, and and then the quiet ones were really the impact players. They're the people that I would, at 5 o'clock, I'd go over to the processing department. I'd be like, hey, I need to have something printed off. And everybody's in that runner stance for the sprinter race, and
Get
it's like
out.
4:59. And they're just like looking at me going, now you can take that for a hike. And, 5 o'clock hits, and, they're usually have the punch clock thing sitting at the top there, the little swipe card. But my impact players are always there day in and out. They usually, I'd find them working late, and I didn't expect them to work late. In fact, that's one of the ways I would usually identify them. But they would be these quiet people. They would always be under the radar. They wouldn't be the rah people. And one thing I found that was really interesting is the more people would kiss my butt and come rah in my office about how great they were doing, those are the people that I really need to go check their work.
Mm-hmm. Right, because it's like you're compensating for something.
Yeah, exactly.
And Chris, you bring up a good point. It was one of the things I looked at through the whole research process, and it was one of those things that I concentrated the whole time writing the book. Is like we see this larger pattern for certain. Like managers know who their impact players are. They appreciate them. They love them. They see that value. They give them bigger opportunities. But like, what about the ones who don't? What about the quiet ones? What about the ones who work behind the scenes? Like the larger pattern we see is that managers are extremely loyal and customers. So this applies whether you work in a company or if you're being an impact player for the customers, the clients that you serve. And people are loyal to them and they promote them. They're visible because they know they're not shining a spotlight on someone who's going to take that and like pursue their own agenda. These are people who are pursuing the right agenda. We see that larger pattern, but what about the person who works behind the scenes, who's quiet? What about maybe like the introvert? What about someone who is in a minority population? Maybe they're a male in an all-female organization, or the other way around, or the person who maybe comes from a racial or ethnic minority. What about the person who comes from an underrepresented group or an underseen group who are doing all the right things, but it's so easy for that person's contribution to be overlooked?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one of the issues I try to deal with in the book. And I guess in short, it's like, what, first of all, managers, like that is your job. It is your job to create an environment where people can show up and play big. Like,
Mhm.
don't be a diminisher, be a multiplier kind of leader. Create an environment where everyone's ideas get seen and used and heard, and people feel like they can contribute. They have the safety. There's a whole, like, there's several management books that can help with that. But it's also your job to make sure that there are people who don't get passed over for
Mhm.
opportunities to contribute, and don't get passed over for recognition because they do this quietly.
Yeah, they are the most quietest players. They do not stick out. I mean, it would take me time to figure them out because I wasn't looking for them because I didn't have your book, Liz. Why didn't you write this like 20 years ago? Um, but no, they are the most quietest ones. And like I said, the more
Often,
yeah.
often they can be quiet. They're not always quiet. Now, some
Mhm.
of them are like loud and driven,
Mm,
and they're people who are like, put me in, coach, put me in, like, I can do this. And they're visible and they're loud. And I don't mean just volume loud. They show up, but it's not like, look at me, look at me. It's, hey, I can do that.
hmm,
Let me have at it. I will do that. It's just really about where their orientation is.
hmm.
The impact player's orientation is around helping to serve a larger agenda rather than driving your own agenda.
Mhm. Would you almost I mean you almost use a sports analogy there. Would that be, kind of the same sort of concept? I mean, you see a Michael Jordan. I mean, clearly he doesn't play within his own box of what his job description is. There's probably lots of other sports players you can put in that thing. They're just, Tom Brady. I mean, they just go above and beyond, and they just to them it's natural.
Hmm. Yeah, and that concept really does come out of sports. And the impact players are these like standout contributors. They're talented. They contribute in really big, meaningful ways. But an impact player in sports is not just someone who's got individual talent. It's someone who raises the confidence level of the team,
Mhm.
which is like, we got Brady, so like we're gonna win. And so people tend to play bigger around them as well.
Mhm.
Like, man, when we got this person on our team, I feel like I can do more. I'm going to win. So I aspire higher. I play bigger.
So is one way to identify them that they're kind of leaders or sub leaders in their own right in inspiring the team, motivating the team. They make good like assistant underlings, technically, even if whether they have the title or not.
Yeah, they tend to be people who are willing to step into leadership roles without needing the formal authority. And kind of the leadership model that they follow is very much, it's a fluid model. So it's not like, okay, I want to be the boss. I always need to be the boss. Like, I'm in charge. I'm in charge. I like to think of those people who always need to be charged as like the parents in the PTA who are always signing up for the big jobs, like always want to be room leader, always want to run everything. At first, I'm like, wow, I really appreciate those people who are taking the difficult voluntary assignments. But then I'm very skeptical of those people. Like, what's like, how's that going to play out? Like, if you're always the boss of the school, like, I have a feeling like this is to benefit your kid, right? Like, I see how this is playing out. The leaders that I really admire, whether they're the community in the workplace, are when people see a problem and they're like, you know what, this needs fixing. This is a leaderless situation, a leadership vacuum.
Hmm.
I'll raise my hand and I'll lead this. We need someone to do this. And they step into that. They take on a big leadership role. They don't need formal authority. They lead through influence. They rally the team. They get the job done. But when the job's done, they're done with their leadership assignment, and then they step back and they let other people lead.
Hmm.
It's like they can follow people as gracefully as they can lead people.
Hmm.
Because we all know
So
people who can't lead, but we also know people who can't follow.
yeah. In fact, I promoted someone into management by mistake and found out the hard way. And so, not impact players, but just people that. Well, I mean, a lot of it was salespeople, and the thing I found out the hard way is sometimes salespeople don't work good in management of other
Mm.
salespeople. They're good at the sales part. So do you talk in the book about how to identify these people and how to empower them more?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first part of the book is really decoding the impact player. How do they think? How do they see situations differently than other people? And how do they respond differently in these situations? And in particularly these 5 situations. So it's like, what's the mental game and the playbook of these impact players? So that's the first, I don't know, 2/3 of the book. And then in the last third of the book, it's okay, if you want to increase your impact, how do you go about doing it? And there's a couple, I call them master skills. Like there's a few things that like sit under all of these practices that you want to get good at, a few fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
And then, here's how you can build a team of these kind of folks, either like by hiring them for starters, like, here, and I kind of offer like, here are the things you'd want to hire for. Which, the short list of this, I need to read the book to get this, is like hire for people with a very strong internal locus of control, for a very strong sense of personal agency, which is like the terms that the psychologists use for simply hire people who see themselves as in charge of themselves.
Oh, would that be self-actualized or?
Well, I think self-actualized is maybe a little bit different than this. This is like a building block to this, which is it's self-managing, self-driven. Like it's seeing oneself as an actor rather than someone who is acted upon.
That's got to be really interesting. I've always, it's, hiring people is always a curious thing, and the art of it. I mean, there really is an art to it. And I don't know, I don't know, do most HR departments, do you see, I'm thinking of some of the stuff I've seen on LinkedIn. Do most HR departments, are they good at identifying this right now, or do they really fail at just trying to, do they really fail at trying to identify these people, or are they good at it?
Oh, goodness. Well, I think historically HR has hired for skills. Like, I think at the worst, let's do like the worst to the best. I think the worst approach, and I'm going to whinge a little bit about the worst. The worst is like when they hire for experience. This makes me crazy. Like, well, you need 10 years of experience. Well, I know people who've put in 10 years working on something who haven't built any skills or good judgment about it, and people who've done that for 0 days who actually have the skills and the mindsets to do that job. So I think at worst, you hire people for experience. Okay, notable exception, maybe like a pilot might be one where, you want a certain number of hours in that seat, having not crashed planes. But, I think at worst, you hire people for experience. Like a little bit better is hiring people for skills. And then above that is hiring people for like the right mindsets. Rather than how do they tend to behave, it's like, how do they think in a situation, which generates it. And then like, I think at the very best, it's knowing what mindsets are really hard to develop in the workplace. So, when people come to us in the workplace, they come from all walks of life, all kinds of life experience. And I ran a corporate university for a bunch of years. I worked at Oracle and was in charge of human resource development, talent management, and ran the university. And, it's very easy to say, okay, here's the kind of mindsets we want here. Here are the practices, here are the skills, here's what we're going to train people to do. But not realizing that some people have got such hard wiring on certain mindsets that you can spend a lot of time in a classroom and in coaching and not have much effect changing that. And other mindsets are really easy to learn in the workplace. And so one of the things I tried to do in this research was look at, okay, what are all the mindsets and practices of these impact players, and which one of them are hard to learn at work and which ones are easy to learn? Because the ones that are hard to learn at work, these are things you want to hire for.
Yeah.
Like hire for the immovable and then train for everything else.
So this is pretty interesting. You've got me thinking a lot about this right now, which is, why you're on the show. But so is it trainable? Is it trainable over short term? And is this a life skill? Because to me, I just brought my life skill into my work. I was already built this way. I was already a machine going into this. So is I guess those are the three questions I have.
Oh, I think it's absolutely a life skill. I think this is the way
Mhm.
we show up at work. And I think a lot of it is an orientation, which is, do we drop into an environment and think, here's what I want, and how do I get other people to give me what I want,
Mhm.
which is about creating value for ourselves? Or do we drop into situations, whether it's work or family life or community life or a church organization, and do we drop in and say, what's important to this group that I'm part of? And how do I make that important enough to me that I can contribute value? It's about where our orientation is. And, you know, it's also about how much ambiguity and uncertainty we're comfortable in, which is a life orientation as well. And it's probably the thing, if, to boil down everything I learned, like the fundamental difference in orientation is that most people, when they look at these messy problems and unclear roles and obstacles and moving targets, they look at this and they're like, oh, those are problems. And those are threats. And I'm going to do my very best to avoid those threats, like to figure out how to skirt them, how to like run around those kind of threats. Whereas the people who really have impact look at those very same situations and go, yeah, those are messy, those are inconvenient. I don't like it. I don't like all that ambiguity and uncertainty, but there's opportunity in there.
Hmm.
Like, I don't like it if I can't figure out who's in charge, but you know what? That's an opportunity to step in and add value. Like, kind of by metaphor, it's the difference between someone who like sees a bee
Mhm.
and says, okay, there's like a swarm of bees and I'm just going to run. I'm going to freak out or I'm going to run, versus the person who sees the same bee and goes, oh, there are more of those. And I'm going to build a hive and harvest honey.
Yeah, that's a good
Same
analogy.
situation, two totally different ways. And I guess I should like, sorry for the trigger warning. I should put a trigger warning. People who are like deathly allergic to bees, but it's I'm not. So I maybe should have been more sensitive to that. It's
We'll put
saying,
a warning on the YouTube.
yeah, it's like if you're terrified of bees. But like, for most people, it's like if you just remain calm, that is not a threat.
Mhm.
And it can be an opportunity. And so it is this life skill of saying, okay, things are messy. I can't control a lot of things, but how do I find an opportunity to add value in situations where I feel like I can't really control?
Mhm. That's a really good analogy. You've got in the book two different sections: the impact players, and then developing the impact player mindset. So you've given them a blueprint to sit down and figure out, okay, how can I develop to one? Is but it almost seems like it would almost be better to hire them built as impact players than it would be to try and develop them. Is that true or not?
This is absolutely true. So I told you I came up through the HR organization and I was on the development side, people development, talent development, organizational development. And my colleague, Joyce, she ran the recruiting side, the operational side of it. So my natural reaction is like, oh, just coach people, develop people. But this is one where my natural reaction is wrong. Best way to build a team of impact players is hire people who have this as their track record. And most important, hire people who have the components of this mindset that are really hard to coach and
Mhm.
teach. And I'll give them to you. I'll just like
Okay.
skip that. Like, yeah, let me see. I just pulled out my list. Okay. The assumptions, there's a bunch. Well, first of all, there's a bunch of parts of this that are very coachable, like building a growth mindset, or like a sense of proactivity and resilience and seeking feedback and offering help and seeing the big picture, influencing other. Very, very coachable kinds of things are all part of this mentality. Here are the parts that are a little hard to coach, meaning you'd be wise to hire people who already have this. On the assumptions, it's having this strong internal locus of control. The sense of like, I can control the outcomes of events in my life. Like I'm not walking through life as a victim. So if someone has a pretty hardwired victim mentality, you as a leader are probably not going to do a lot to change that.
Yeah, that's inherent.
Yeah, that kind of comes from experiences we had probably as a little girl, little boy, early experiences in our career that shaped that. It's not impossible. It's just not easy. The other mindset, I term it informality, but this orientation around hierarchy. Like some people just have this really strong orientation of, oh, that person is my boss, they're my superior, I salute, I do what they tell me, I don't, go around them. And some of this is cultural. There are parts of the world where there's a lot of hierarchy, power distance in the culture. That's a little bit harder to change, according to the coaches I surveyed on this.
What about the military, if I might inject that?
Well, I don't know. I don't think I know enough to say whether individuals who come out of the military come with that sense or not.
Because they really have a hard wire to hierarchy, and even if they don't respect their bosses, they respect the uniform, and there's some interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, here's where impact player mentality meets up against this. I had been working at Oracle for a number of years. I had been working very closely with our president, Ray Lane, and I was kind of considered to be, I don't know, his go-to. I think he would say I was probably his impact player. And I worked really closely with him on a lot of initiatives. Well, he hired a chief of staff, a guy named Mike, who came out of the military. And Mike had this really strong sense of hierarchy built into his kind of way of working. And he knew the role I had played. He knew kind of the role I was playing in the company, sort of shaping a lot of things. And so he sat me down and he's like, okay, we met. And he's like, Liz, this is how we're going to work. If you want, to get something in front of Ray, what I want you to do is put together a brief, give that to me. I'll take it to Ray, and then da-da-da. And he describes this of how he wants me to operate. And I knew in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to just say, yes, Mike, I'll do that. But I couldn't bring myself to do it because I just don't buy into this kind of process and hierarchy. And I said to him, and so Mike wasn't my boss or anything. He was Ray's chief of staff. And I'm like, Mike, I need to let you, oh, and I should also say Mike was probably 15 to 20 years older than me at the time. And I said, Mike, I need to let you know I have absolutely no intention of doing that. His reaction was not that. He just kind of a dead silence. And I said, no, Mike, I'm not going to do that. That's just not the way I work. I said, I make really careful use of Ray's time. But the way I work is if I'm working on something important, I'm going to talk to whoever I need to get that job done. And if I need to talk to Larry Ellison, our CEO, Ray, I'm going to use their time wisely, but I'm not afraid. I will go to them when I need them. And I'll go to anyone at any level of the organization. That's the way I work. And I said, so I'm sorry, I'm just not. And I was like, I know I'm supposed to agree to this and then go around it, but I'm I can't bring myself to do it. And he just was like, okay.
Yeah.
And he ended up not lasting long in the company because that's just not the way that you work. If you want to get, it doesn't lead to a lot of impact.
Yeah, just building roadblocks, really. And people that are go-getters, impact players like you were or are, you're
I was in that moment for sure. Yeah.
You're get it done people. And you're we can't, especially in, the way the corporate world works today and business works today, it's speed. You can't be sitting around going, well, we should spend a year doing research and figuring it all out. You've got to go because your competitors are going. And if you don't beat them to the market, they're going to beat you to the market, or they're going to take market share from you. I really love this chapter, build a high impact team, the one you're referencing. There's a lot of great data in here. SOAR hiring technique. This is pretty cool. Situation, outlook, action, and result. I'm going to be bookmarking this so I can go back through it. And there were some other things I saw in here. Promoting desired behaviors, containing contrary behaviors. This is really cool. I love this chapter.
Oh, I'm so glad because you know what? I was like, oh man, did I do a bad job on that chapter? But this
No.
is part, Chris, you and I talked about it. Once you write a book, I go through this existential crisis, and I have days where I'm like, oh wow, this is a really helpful book. I think this is a good book. I
Yeah.
think people are going to get value out of this. And then I have days I'm like, this is the dumbest book in the world. Like, why did I write this? This is so stupid. Like it's common sense because I've been working with it so long
Yeah.
that I get like a nerd to its virtues.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but
That's
anyway,
the challenge of being an author and writing, and then the editing process. You're just like, I'm so sick of this.
I'm so, yeah, like surely someone else is sick, and they're like, no, Liz, we haven't started it yet, so
Yeah.
we're not sick of it. I'm like, I know, but I am. But no, I do think there are probably some useful things in that chapter about what
Yeah.
you as a leader can do to build a high impact team. And it was one of the reasons why I rejected this notion of like the MVP of a team, because with an MVP on a team, like you get one at any given time. And the beauty of thinking about top contributors as impact players, not MVPs, is you can have a bunch of them on a team. In fact, you could, with a well managed team, you could have an entire team of impact players. And that's like a pretty cool team to work on.
Yeah, I'd like to have 100% if I could. If the 80-20 rule doesn't always kick in, I always was fighting that in my business and hiring. It's no matter how much I tried to put my thumb on the scale, sometimes the 80-20 rule would always apply. You have the top 20% who bring in 80% of your work and business and success. And no matter how much I tried to hire, and I never tried to hire with some of the principles you have in the book here, so I'm going to be applying those. I just never could. I never could hit the mark, and so I'm really interested to see how this plays out. We could talk for hours, you and I, Liz, about this because I love this data, and it's a great book. Anything you want to touch on before we go out? Because we want people to, of course, go buy the book instead of just watching the podcast.
Well, I think I've been an author long enough now where my goal isn't for people to buy the book as much as for people to experiment with the ideas.
Mm.
And here's, I guess there's one thing I want to add. We're recording this right now, October 2021. The world is just coming out of this pandemic, and we're now facing a different sort of epidemic of burnout. And we've got this great resignation thing happening, and people are leaving companies, people are skeptical about their jobs, people are burning out as an epidemic. And I just want to leave maybe this thought. I think the normal way we look at burnout is that burnout is the outcome of working too hard. Like when we have too much work, we burn out. And that can be the case. But here's what I've learned studying leadership is that the best leaders don't like just give people more work, they give people harder work.
Mm.
And when they do, work is exhilarating.
Mm-hmm.
And then when people are underutilized, work is a drag. It's
Mm-hmm.
draining, it's unfulfilling, and we burn out. Like I think burnout is more often the result of too little impact, not too much work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way out of this burnout epidemic is not just giving people time off work or
Mm-hmm.
taking time off work. I think it's less about slamming on the brakes to work and more about putting our foot on the accelerator, which is like, how do we as leaders give people a bigger opportunity to have impact? How do we as contributors at all levels,
Mm-hmm.
how do we orient ourselves so that we have more impact? Because I've never really known someone who was having a lot of impact who said they were feeling burnt out.
Mm. I've been watching a lot of this and why more employees have been staying out of the market. We've seen a huge numbers of people that are starting their own companies and business, um, which is very different than the 2008 recession. And what I seem to hear people saying is like what you're talking about, where they're looking for more value in their work or to be valued, and probably feeling more valued is by having more value to work. They don't want to just be the dish boy or the dish girl or
Mm-hmm.
the waitress anymore. They're like looking for more value, more experience in their life. And I've never heard anybody say, well, we want less work, or they're looking for a value that enriches their lives. Do you agree with that?
Well, I do. And I love the way you put this, which is people want to contribute value.
Hmm.
That's the process of impact. And they also, it's not just about doing things that are valuable and having impact, it's about being valued.
Hmm.
And so, like, bottom line for managers, like, if you want to quell this kind of burnout epidemic, is yeah, you may need to give some people some time off. Like right now, a little bit of R&R would probably help a lot of people, but that's not the answer.
Hmm.
It's like lead your teams in a way that people can do valuable work
Hmm.
that has meaning, that really matters, and make sure people feel valued on
Hmm.
top of that.
Yeah,
And like
there
when
you
we
go.
feel appreciated for doing impactful work, like boom, like work is exhilarating, not exhausting.
Yeah, and I think that's what employees are looking for. They did that internal sort of value research, and they went, what is life, and what the hell am I doing from this coronavirus thing? And I think that's why a lot of employers are struggling with it, because like, what, you don't want to come back to your dead end, just do your robot routine job. You want value. What's that? And you want to be paid more. So there you go. Liz, it's been wonderful having you on the show. Like I said, we could talk for hours, and it's been really insightful. We need to have you back, of course. Maybe we should have you on to plug your other books. But give us your plugs so people can find you on the interwebs, please.
Well, at impactplayersbook.com. Other books you can find at, let me see, multipliersbooks.com, rookiesmarts.com. Interesting, last night my son-in-law changed it to cookiesmarts.com because he said, Liz, you actually know a lot more about cookies. um, and then you can find information about me at thewisemangroup.com.
There you go. There you go. Thank you very much, Liz, for being on the show. We certainly appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise.
Oh, it's so fun to talk with you, Chris.
Thank you very much. And thanks to my audience for tuning in. Go pre-order the book. You definitely want to get a hold of this. October 19th, 2021. It's going to be coming fresh, hot off the presses with that fine new print smell. Get it at anywhere you find bookstores. Fine bookstores are sold. Find books at fine bookstores are sold. Don't go to the alleyways to buy your books. Impact Players, how to take the lead, play bigger, and multiply your impact. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to go to youtube.com/Chris Voss to see the video version of this. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. Go to all our groups on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all those places the cool kids are playing these days. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other, and we'll see you guys next time.